Now juxtapose that to Zion Williamson, who looked fat, out of shape, unfocused, lethargic, and blasé.
It looked like me and Shaq had a baby.
Zion Williamson was the most dominant high school player since LeBron James. He won basically every award possible, set records in college that will never be broken, and at the NBA level has also broken records time and time again. Zion Williamson was originally thought to be the next face of the NBA, but there was always just one problem holding him back, and it had everything to do with himself and how he conducts his life. What can Zion Williamson do to turn his career around? Is it too late for him already? But more importantly, what is this problem that is consistently holding Zion back from being the next coming of LeBron James? So before we get to the content, make sure you drop like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications, because we're about to ramp things up for Thanksgiving and the holiday season on this channel. Now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Tyreek Hill just needs 1 yard on Thanksgiving for you to make money on PrizePicks, and here's how to take advantage. First, sign up for PrizePicks and use my promo code microphone to get an additional $50 when you make an entry of $5. Then pick Tyreek Hill to get 1 receiving yard and combine it with another square to get 3 extra money, or 2 squares to 5 extra money. I give away a lot of my picks for free on Instagram at TheFlightMike and on Snapchat FlightMike Snap, and this past weekend we absolutely crushed it, hitting on 4 of our picks, and a lot of you tailed these picks on Instagram and Snapchat and made money as well. So hurry up and take advantage of this offer. It's only available until Thanksgiving Day. And thank you, PrizePicks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I know what you might be thinking. Mike, every single few years there's people saying that an individual is going to be the next coming of LeBron James. So how did Zion Williamson get this comparison to begin with? Well, coming out of high school, Zion Williamson was 6'5" and 265 pounds from South Carolina, who for all intent and purposes was dominating the high school game at the same level as LeBron James over a decade prior. I mean, his stats just speak for themselves. In his senior year, he averaged 36 points, 11 rebounds, and nearly 6 stocks per game, all while just playing 23 minutes a game. In the past, players have dominated high school and would eventually become the #1 prospect, and this happens each and every year. But the dominance of Zion Williamson was at a level that we haven't seen in a very long time. So when Zion decided to attend Duke with fellow top recruits RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish, the world was anticipating greatness, and they didn't have to wait long to see that greatness play out on the court. At Duke, Zion was by far and away the best player on the court, averaging over 22 points and 9 rebounds per game. But more importantly, he set the NCAA record for 2-point field goal percentage, shooting just under 75% in his career. Zion ended up winning the Wooden Award for Most Outstanding College Basketball Player, along with the Naismith Award, the AP Player of the Year Award. Basically any award he was eligible to win, he won. That season, Duke ended up being ranked #1 in the AP poll, but unfortunately lost to Michigan State in the Elite 8. The frustrating part is Duke only lost by 1 point, but it definitely wasn't because of Zion, who led the team in scoring with 24 points and even led the team in rebounds with 14. After one season, there was no question in anyone's mind that Zion was going to be a one and done, so it was time for him to declare for the NBA draft. And listed at 6'7", 285 pounds, Zion Williamson was an athletic anomaly whose high school comparison to LeBron James only became more and more true. You see, 6'7", 285 pounds isn't a normal size for an individual that is in shape and wants to play a long career of basketball. And there were already rumors going around that executives and analysts were concerned about Zion Williamson's weight, and they had a right to be concerned. Zion was just 19, and when he was eventually drafted, he would become the second heaviest player in the NBA, just behind Boban Marjanovic, who, keep in mind, is literally over a foot taller than Zion. I mean, he even ripped through a shoe in college trying to plant his foot and pivot. The guy clearly needs some sort of extra reinforced shoe to hold his size. Now, despite these concerns, many were focused on Zion Williamson's generational talent, and as a result of this, the 2019 2019 NBA draft lottery was one of the most highly anticipated draft lotteries in recent memory. Prior to this NBA draft lottery, Knicks fans were already creating big three graphics of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and Zion Williamson. And when the New Orleans Pelicans got the first overall pick, it would have been an understatement to say they were excited. Just take a look for yourselves. This reaction's funny, but it's not as funny as New York Knicks fans who were hoping that Zion could come and save their 17-win team. Either way, all 285 pounds of Zion Williamson was headed to New Orleans to play basketball, but not before the first of many incidents would hold him back. Now bear in mind, going into this season, the Pelicans have never had more excitement. I mean, they just traded Anthony Davis in one of the more one-sided trades we've ever seen in NBA history, yielding them Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, multiple first-round picks, and they had Drew Holiday and JJ Redick on the roster. I mean, this team theoretically was in a good position to compete. They were drawing comparisons to the young OKC Thunder of the early 2010s, and they had some lofty expectations for themselves. Fans wouldn't be surprised if the Pelicans were able to sneak into the playoffs as a result of all these moves. Before he could even play in a preseason game, Zion went absolutely viral in the NBA Summer League for the wrong reason. This photo of Zion Williamson went absolutely viral when he was in Summer League, and fans couldn't help but notice the belly he had. It was truly a cause for concern, and it was actually one of the first pieces of content I made on this YouTube channel. Now, fans didn't really pay any mind to it because so long Zion was able to ball, then life was going to be good in New Orleans. But before Zion Williamson could even play in a regular season game, he tore his meniscus in a preseason game and needed knee surgery. Now, this might seem like a freak injury, but when you consider the fact that after being drafted, Zion Williamson was already the second heaviest player in the NBA, this makes a lot of sense considering nearly 300 pounds is a lot to carry for a 6'7" frame. But Zion and the Pelicans took a completely separate route. It was something that none of us were expecting. They didn't acknowledge that Zion had a weight issue. They were just trying to deflect as much as they possibly could. So when you asked Zion Williamson and the Pelicans, they claimed that the injury wasn't weight related, but in hindsight, these seem to be words from an entity that was completely in denial. Regardless, after missing 3 months of basketball, Zion returned to the court and entered the history books. In his rookie season, Zion became the first rookie since Michael Jordan to post 16 20-point games within his first 20 contests, and posted the highest scoring average through his first 24 career NBA games since Michael Jordan in 1983. He also became the first teenager in NBA history to score 20 or more points in 10 straight games. Sure, Zion Williamson had played a small sample size of games, but in those games, he was historically amazing. But still, there are questions about his weight, and I don't really know how I felt about Zion's response to all of this. I mean, this is what Zion would have to say.
How do you feel when people try to make your size and your weight an issue? I know that's something that's talked about constantly with you. How do you feel when you hear that kind of stuff?
Everybody is entitled to their own opinion, but I'm just going to stick to the opinions to the people closest to me and my team.
And fans of the NBA all felt the same way. Just imagine what Zion could do if he had a healthy offseason, got into shape, was conditioned, and played a full season. He would play like a Charles Barkley or even an undersized Giannis.
Has he impressed you, Shaq?
Yes, he has impressed me. I agree with Charles. He has the best second jump I've ever seen. Very, very explosive. Like a lot of people question his weight. He's young. He's going to get into better shape the more he plays.
In his sophomore season, there were high expectations for the Pelicans and Zion Williamson. At this point, Brandon Ingram had already developed into a solid second option for the team after being traded to the Pelicans a year prior. Lonzo Ball completely remade his entire jump shot and became one of the better three-point shooters in the NBA. And the team had a pretty solid bench. Players like JJ Redick, Josh Hart, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Eric Bledsoe, James Johnson. Plus, they hired a brand new veteran head coach in Stan Van Gundy.
This team has more talent. They have not only assets they can bring in the right pieces for, they may already have a lot of the right pieces. Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, you'll figure out who works, who doesn't. You'll trade away, bring in someone, Drew Holiday. You have a veteran who can really play, a shooter like Redick. He has much more talent on this team than he had in Orlando, and he has more time to get it done because Zion's only in his second season.
In this season, we saw what Zion Williamson was capable of doing when he put in the time and effort. Williamson missed just 11 games, putting up a career career-high 27 points per game, becoming one of the most dominant paint players in the NBA and making an all-star team at just 20 years old. In this season, Zion Williamson entered history books, following a streak where he played 25 games in a row and recorded over 20 points while shooting 50% from the field, snapping Shaq's record. Despite the individual accolades, the Pelicans fell short of the high expectations they had as they finished the season as the 11th seed in the West. But going into Zion's third season, expectations were higher than ever before, and rightfully so. The team would acquire Devontae Graham, Larry Nance Jr., and would find a diamond in the rough, drafting Herb Jones in the second round, who turned out to be one of the best rookies in his class. The team also went out and hired a brand new head coach in Willie Green, who was replacing Stan Van Gundy, who had resigned at the end of the season. Now, the Pelicans even traded for a perennial 20 points per game scorer, CJ McCollum, mid-season, and that would have helped Zion a lot had he not missed the entire season rehabbing a foot injury. But when you take a look at the way Zion Williamson handled these big moves, you can tell that he was a little checked out. I mean, look at what JJ Redick, his former teammate, had to say after Zion Williamson didn't even call CJ McCollum to welcome him to the team.
I get that he's hurt and away from the team, but you just traded for one of the 50 best players in the league. Reach out and say hello. This is a pattern of behavior with Zion. And look, I was his teammate. I can describe him as a detached teammate.
Okay, so you might be thinking maybe Zion was checked out because he had another foot injury and he was just so focused on rehab. But after the initial surgery, Williamson was expected to return by November. Months later, it was found out that the injury wasn't healing properly and his return was delayed until the All-Star break. And later, it was announced that he would miss the entire season. So what could be the cause of Zion missing the entire season for an injury that most experts thought would only take him a few months to rehab? Well, maybe it had something to do with the fact that he weighed over 330 pounds. You heard that correctly. According to Tim McMahon of ESPN, in addition to multiple sources, Zion Williamson weighed 330 pounds in December of 2021. Look back just a month or two prior during the beginning of the season, Zion looked even heavier and even Charles Barkley knew it.
It looked like me and Shaq had a baby.
The irony behind all of this happening just a month or two after the season started is that prior to getting hurt, Zion had a commercial released with Mountain Dew, and not only does he look huge in the video, but collaborating with Mountain Dew after years of being called fat just shows a huge lack of self-awareness, and they didn't really capture my man's most flattering angle. I mean, he's sitting on his looking chubby as hell, playing video games while drinking soda. And before you're wondering if this is AI generated, this is before the days of AI generation. The craziest part is after missing the entire season, the New Orleans Pelicans decided to sign Zion Williamson to a 5-year max contract worth $195 million. But there's a catch. The contract would begin a few years later in the 2023-24 season, and if he plays under a certain amount of games, the Pelicans could waive him after 2025 and owe him nothing. Another stipulation was that Zion Williamson must have a combined weight and body fat percentage of under 295. This means that if Zion Williamson weighs 285 pounds, his body fat percentage must be a 10 or under. This is an unprecedented contract stipulation, and the only other thing I can even think of that comes close to this was in football when the Packers and Seahawks had weight stipulations for former standout running back Eddie Lacy, and would even give him bonuses for losing weight. But still, signing Zion Williamson for the future was smart. If he could manage his weight and get into shape, Zion was one of the best players in the NBA, and the New Orleans Pelicans were one of the best teams in the NBA when Zion was fully healthy. The problem was his health was very inconsistent. But going into the 2022-23 season, the Pelicans were very hopeful. The roster the Pelicans built around Zion was stacked. They had CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy, Jonas Valanciunas, Herb Jones, Najee Marshall, and Josh Richardson. The team was built with depth in mind and a playoff run in the near future. However, of course, with Zion Williamson, things would never go right. During the first 29 games of the season, the Pelicans Pelicans were incredible. They were 18-11, 7 games over 500. They were currently in a playoff spot, and Williamson looked like a potential MVP candidate, averaging 26 points and 7 rebounds a game. But then he would suffer another injury, and the Pelicans said that he'd be out until after the All-Star break. With this in mind, Williamson still made the All-Star team. However, soon after the event, it was announced that Zion would miss the rest of the season once again. I can't think of situations that are even remotely similar to what Zion's going through, because yeah, injuries are part of the NBA and they suck, but typically a player comes out, gets injured, we get a timeline of 1 or 2 months, and they usually return by that 1 or 2 month timeline. In Zion's case, he's usually given us a timeline of 1 or 2 months, but then would miss the entire season. He's also the heaviest player in the NBA, aside from a 7'7" freak of nature European man who is as slim as a stick due to his height. During this time, Zion Williamson had an interview with Gilbert Arenas, and his answer to Agent Zero's questions were very enlightening about his state of mind.
Is it hard to diet at your age? Be honest.
Since it's you, I'll be real. There are times when I will say that, man, it's hard, man. Like, you feel like all the money in the world, man, it is hard.
Later in the interview, Zion would also vaguely mention a lot of drama he had with his mother's child. That's a completely separate topic that we have multiple videos on that I really don't want to bring up again. Now, up until the 2023-24 season, Zion Williamson was under heavy pressure from fans and the media to take his body more seriously so he could stay on the court and become the superstar we all knew he was capable of being. In fact, Stephen A. Smith said it best here.
Now juxtapose that to Zion Williamson, who looked fat, out of shape, unfocused, lethargic, and blasé.
This must have hit home for Zion because prior to the 2023-24 NBA season, Zion was apparently in the best shape of his life, finally looking like the product he was at Duke. Even Shaquille O'Neal, a man who has mocked and made fun of Zion in the past, posted on his Instagram story saying that Zion looked jacked. And honestly, he played like it too. Zion played a career-high 70 games and averaged 23 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 5 assists per game while shooting an efficient 57% from the field. Zion Williamson had done it, and with the team consisting much of the same roster that they had a season prior, the Pelicans won 49 games and made the playoffs, proving the fact that the Pelicans had built a contender around Zion. But of course, with Zion Williamson, that can't be the whole story. Yes, the Pelicans ended up making the playoffs, but losing to a stacked Thunder team in the first round. But that was after Zion Williamson had hurt his hamstring in a play-in game against the Lakers and was forced to miss the series. Okay, that sucks, but at least Zion is back to playing a full season, and he looks like he's in shape, right? I mean, after all, look at all these photos from last offseason. The dude looks ripped and in shape. In fact, according to reports, Zion weighed 281 pounds and intended to lose even more weight as the season progressed. This was news for the Pelicans, who had just won nearly 50 games the year prior. They even went out and practically stole DeJounte Murray, one of the best two-way guards in the entire NBA. The Pelicans had a bright future going into this current season, and there was no reason to believe that they wouldn't improve from last season. But then things got out of hand really quickly. In the first game of the season, the Pelicans beat the Bulls 123-111, but in the process, new guard DeJounte Murray fractured his hand. Okay, that sucks, but they still have the core of Zion, McCollum, and Ingram, right? Well, just a few games later, Zion Williamson re-aggravated the hamstring he hurt against the Lakers back in the play-in game. To make matters even worse, there are reports saying he'll miss 4 to 6 weeks, which may be accurate for most players, but with Zion Williamson, that might mean he's due to miss the entire season. The Pelicans are now 4-14. They have no idea when Zion or DeJounte Murray will be back, and now they have to ask themselves some pretty hard questions. Recently, Zion has gotten brand new tattoos on his back, and in order to show them off, he took a video and posted it onto social media, which I guess you could think is cool, right? But most fans didn't notice the tattoos. It was the fact that it seems like he put on weight again. And the craziest part about this video is it's literally Zion getting a tattoo, and some of the B-roll is the fact that a sandwich is being made for him. It's like, okay, I understand the man needs to eat. It's just, you didn't need to add the B-roll of the food. I mean, bro, just take a regular picture of your back. I mean, it's crazy because Zion Williamson has done it again. After yet another offseason of looking like he changed his entire physique, he goes back back and puts on the weight during an injury yet again. Now, I know it's hard to maintain and lose weight when you hurt your hamstring. I get it. You can't do physically intensive activity, but dude, haven't you heard the phrase abs are made in the kitchen? You're an NBA player on a max contract. If a middle-aged mom in the middle of the suburbs can stick to a diet making under $100,000 a year, you can too, Zion. I mean, seriously, come on. To make matters even worse, or I guess funnier at this point, Zion has left his agency recently, and the speculation is that it's because they wouldn't be able to force a trade out of New Orleans. The reason that's funny is because what leverage does Zion have? How could he force a trade? His contract is very cuttable due to the stipulations in it. He's had one fully healthy season, and even in that year, his numbers were deflated. Who wants to trade for a guy who hasn't displayed any sort of discipline in his 6-year NBA career? Nobody. Listen, the Pelicans are unlikely to cut Zion Williamson, even if he doesn't meet the games played clause in his contract. He's too much of an impact on the court when he is healthy and in decent shape. But if Zion is even remotely healthy toward the trade deadline this season, and the team is mediocre or even downright bad, I wouldn't be shocked if the Pelicans trade Zion Williamson and try to rebuild entirely. We are 6 years into the Zion Williamson experiment in New Orleans, and we have learned two things. One, he cannot remain healthy or in shape long enough for a playoff push, or he just straight up can't play a full season. There's one way to solve all of this, and it's simple. Get this man on a strict diet and on some sort of plan. It is quite literally that simple. It really crushes me because Zion Williamson was the next prodigy. Jordan was the chosen one. Then he passed the torch off to Kobe. Then Kobe passed it to LeBron. LeBron was supposed to pass it off to Zion as the next athletic freak, and he chose to throw it all away to eat some authentic Louisiana gumbo. And it's one thing to watch a guy like Ben Simmons, who is extremely talented, throw his entire career away just because he doesn't have the drive to be elite at basketball, but it's another to see Zion Williamson potentially throw his entire career away because, in the words of Stephen A. Smith, he can't stop eating. Now, going into 2025, Zion Williamson has a choice, and at the end of the day, he is still young at the age of 24, and he can still get his career back on track. When he's on the court, when he's in shape, he's one of the best and most exciting players to watch in all of basketball. Now there are two paths he can take: get his eating habits under control, or quite literally eat his way out of the league.